Welcome to Mortgage Masterminds. I'm Richard Greaser, VP of Marketing at Sales Boomerang, and my guest is Scott Payne, CEO at SDP Solutions. Did I get that right, Scott?
SDP, yep,
Love
that's
it.
it.
In case you don't know who we are at Sales Boomerang, or you've been living under a rock since 2017, Sales Boomerang notifies lenders the moment one of their borrowers needs a loan. So 1 in 2 of the biggest lending companies in the U.S. use Sales Boomerang to make sure they reach out to their borrowers when they need a loan. You want to know when your borrower needs a loan, often before they do? That's what we do. So if you want to learn more about us, go to salesboomerang.com, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Scott, let's get started. Great to have you on.
Hey, Richard, how you doing? It's great to be on with you.
Cool. So I'm a big Scott fan. Everybody I talk to who has worked with you is a massive Scott fan. It's because your expertise is kind of unparalleled. When we look at folks that we can point to who they should be talking to in terms of like CRM automation, CRM implementation, strategies, workflows, processes to streamline and improve their businesses. This is really what makes a mortgage lending team work efficiently or not work efficiently, right? The profitability for the company, it's everything. Everyone at my company and everyone we talk to, they all point to you. And unfortunately, you kind of unfortunately, you specialize in Velocify implementations because of your background. But I think your knowledge transcends Velocify, and so it doesn't matter what CRM you're using. People are going to learn from you in terms of what they need to have with whatever CRM they decide to use.
Yeah, for sure. And my history is Velocify. That's just kind of what I grew up on. I worked at Nation Star Mortgage. Started my career there after college and spent 10 years and 1 week to be exact there. But what I ended up, I implemented Velocify, team of 1,000 people or so using the system. One of the largest Velocify clients really had to learn how to use the system in unique ways for our business, and over the years, just kind of picked up little things here and there and tricks of the trade or what have you. Ended up going to, found that I was so passionate about Velocify and lead management that even though that was kind of my job and my job was evolving as I moved up the ranks, I didn't get to spend time in Velocify much anymore, and that's really where I was passionate and woke up every morning, being in the system itself. So what did I do? I convinced Velocify to hire me and got them to bring me on as a business consultant, where I was helping clients who were struggling with the system and needed those tips and tricks. So I ended up going into be an account manager, essentially enterprise account manager. I had some of the top accounts of Velocify, largest accounts, if you will, and really had to work with them to find those strategic ways to use the system. Long story short, I was there for 4 years. Built a really good network and realized over time that there were so many clients out there who needed that help every day, whether it be administration or strategy, what have you. And so in 2019, started my own business, SDP Solutions. It's really, everyone asks what it stands for. It's my initials, Scott Douglas Payne. So SDP, and I'll tell a little story about the logo here once we get to it a little later potentially. But yeah, that's what we do. To your point, we specialize in everything lead management. Most of our clients today are Velocify related, but it's not to say that we can't help with, just talking about strategy. I'm actually talking to a couple of companies over in Europe right now who don't have Velocify, but they just need help with lead management strategies and ways to prioritize things with their salespeople and what have you. So it transcends even over the ocean as well, lead management. So yeah. That's SDP in a nutshell.
Very cool. Just so everybody knows who's listening and can't see Scott wincing every time you hear a bang, he is a bazillionaire from all the success that he has had with SDP, and he's installing a indoor trampoline right behind the wall behind him. It's one of those big indoor trampoline parks,
Yeah, no, it's actually a washing machine that's been out for 2 weeks, and my wife's about to kill me. And we're hopeful that this fix is going to work today because we have piles of laundry to get done this weekend. So.
Cool. All right, well, let's start with something like, if anybody can't see Scott's wearing a hat and typically wouldn't. And so let me just start there. Scott, why are you wearing a hat?
Well, I haven't had a haircut in weeks now. It's actually been 2 weeks. Usually, every 3 to 4 weeks, you'll get a haircut. And so, I call up my person who I go to and did my appointment, went to schedule it, and come to find out the place she was at shut down. And she's now trying to find a job somewhere else. So long story short, where I thought the parallels would come into our conversation today was the fact that there's a million places around here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area I could go get a haircut. But I want to go to this one person. And I want to go to this one person because I don't have to tell her what to do. I know I'm going to get a good haircut every time. She knows what I like as far as, what to do on the top, whatever. All of that comes into play with what, the things that we do every day. As we talk to our salespeople, or as people are, working with Sales Boomerang, is how do you stay top of mind for your customers? But not only that, like, how do you make sure that, you're delivering what it is they want for their particular situation? I was a loan officer back in my day, and I was thinking through this as well, that I not to brag or anything, but most of my customers had a great experience, at least for the things that I could control. Appraisals coming in low, stuff that I couldn't do, but everyone had a good experience. I knew by the end of the transaction, by the time the loan closed, I knew the kids' names, I knew what sports they played, I knew all of this information about the customers itself. And for customers to, that would eventually come back to me. And I set up a system myself back then without, really having much technology, where I would track these things, so that when I spoke to them the next time, I was asking about Susie and if she went to college yet, or how the dog was doing, these types of things. So having that kind of insight and building that with your customers, much like my hairdresser, I'm just not going to go anywhere else. I'm waiting until she finds a job. And if I have to wear a hat for a podcast, I'll wear a hat. It's fine, and wear it throughout the day. But, it's a great experience. And I think the lenders that we work with today that use Sales Boomerang and Velocify as an example, we're able to take them from, hey, it's been a year since you've talked to them, but here's the information. Here's the reason why you got this alert. It's this type of alert. Here's what you should say. Here's what, the type of thing is. And oh, by the way, here's your information that you tracked last time, which was the kid's name or what have you. And we set up these tools to provide that type of experience that, I desire for my haircut.
Wow. I love the tie-in there. That's a great analogy. And I think everybody listening is probably thinking that must be one awesome haircut, like,
it's like my old, my white pair old man, dad life shoes, right? Like, they just fit, they're comfortable. I know they work. And stick to it once you know something works.
Totally. Well, all right. Well, let's just talk about what we were talking about earlier when you were telling us a little bit about how you got into what you do today, right? I mean, you've had an interesting story. You were originating for a while. You were at Velocify, right? Why don't you tell us just a little bit about tell us about the name SDP. I really love what you were telling me about how that's your North Star, like in all the interactions with lenders and in turn, like their borrowers, and kind of how you got here.
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned I was an originator. I worked for NationStar, which at the time was Syntex Home Equity, which was a subprime mortgage company back in 2004. And I would say 95% of the company, maybe 98% of the company, was originating subprime loans. But we had this one little small division that was doing all of our loans through Fannie Mae, going through DU, and we were working with more of a prime type of customer, but we were just part of the subprime company. And whoever it was at the company had kind of the foresight to know that in the event something were to go south, we could always fall back on the ability to write a loan through Fannie Mae and DU. So we had these teams set up. We had like 4 teams, and we're talking, a team of loan officers, right, in a call center of, call it 100 teams, small part of it. But what I had to learn on my own was I was working lending tree leads with, competing against all of the prime companies that were out there, running the same underwriting guidelines, what have you. But we had our little added overlays on cost. We had our added overlays on, we were adding subprime overlays to these DU findings where it's like, you need this, but DU says I don't need this. Like, why do we need this? Well, that's just the way we did it. And that's, the underwriter couldn't kind of get over that it wasn't a subprime loan sometimes. So, ultimately what that, forced me to do was we were really competitive, really uncompetitive when it came to rate. So I had to be really competitive when it came to service and the way that I worked my leads and managed my leads and how I followed up and do all these things. So we had some systems in place, but I found myself always kind of setting up my own little system to work my leads and do it the way that I wanted, whether it be something like flagging the lead in a certain way or, kind of scoring the lead, if you will, in a certain way. And so that it would increase my follow-up to these leads or not, what have you. So I came up with my own system. Fast forward to As I kind of worked my way up, I went through a program called Management and Training Program. MIT is what we called it. It was like the dream of every loan officer to go through this program. Not only did you make good money and kind of in a guaranteed way, but you got to go learn each, different positions within the company. So 30 days, they took me off the sales floor and about 10 other people off the sales floor, and they made us a processor for 30 days. They gave us a pipeline. We had to process the loan. Same thing with 30 days with underwriting. We had to underwrite loans for 30 days with a whole pipeline. That was literally what we did for 30 days. The thought is that if you're going to get someone who's going to become a manager, you want them to understand what the processor is going through on a day in and day out basis. You're going to put in cleaner files. You're going to do it the right way. You're not going to throw stuff against the wall and hope it sticks. You're going to understand what that day in the life is like. Same thing with the underwriter and so on. The last 30 days of this program, we got to go spend time with, essentially you went to some role. So some went to HR, some went to finance, and essentially you were shadowing these people, but it was your job for 30 days. Mine, luckily, was marketing. And so I was in charge for 30 days of distributing leads to our 98 retail branches that we had throughout the country, where we were feeding them 2 to 3 Lending Tree leads per day. So I was in charge of optimizing the distribution, understanding what branches needed what, because they were converting higher or lower or what have you, and it was always kind of moving around. And that's what I did for 30 days. Loved it. Had so much fun with it. But time was up. I had to go run my team. I went and ran a sales team for a year and a half. I was training college kids right out of college, teaching them how to sell a loan. Mostly it was really going after college athletes was kind of my thing. I had a basketball player at TCU, a basketball player at North Texas, swimmer, and try to get competitive type people. So I had a lot of fun doing that for about a year and a half. But then they asked me to come and run a sales marketing team. And that's really where my career took off, because the sales, what we found was that sales and marketing was always butting heads, always. Obviously lead quality was never good enough. There was never enough leads, but then marketing had the, well, you're not working the lead the right way. You're not calling as like you should, what have you. And every meeting became this battle between the two. And again, someone at the company, on who it was, had the foresight to say, we need someone to be in the middle of the two and play a mediator, essentially. And so what my role became, essentially, I took over a role of a sales marketing role, where marketing would go get all the leads, they'd give them to me, and they'd say, you figure out what to do with them. And when sales gets mad about how you distributed them, they're going to come back to you, not us. You figure that out. So I was involved in making sure that we were optimized from an analytics standpoint. Are we, who does what leads well and how many should they get, and all of that. And then same thing with sales. When sales had issues with leads, they had to come to me. And then I had to, you had to screen through some of it. And then you get the right stuff over to marketing. The other stuff, you have to tell them, hey, sorry, that's just the way it works, whatever. But ultimately, I was in charge of lead distribution and lead analytics. And, we got to a point where we needed a lead management system to do all of the crazy things we wanted to do. So we went out and found a company called Leads 360, which eventually became Velocify. And the rest is history, I guess. But I think for us and what we do in our, talk more about our team that we've grown, is that a lot of us on the team have lived in the shoes of our clients. We've lived in the shoes of trying to hit a lead quota for the sales teams and making sure the leads are good quality and making sure that we have a right strategy. We've lived those, those days. We understand what people are up against, whether it be a sales manager or a loan officer or the marketing person.
Yeah. Wow. A lot to unpack there. That's a lot of knowledge getting dropped, and it really shows the experience you've got. For sure, people listening right now, directors, VPs of marketing, right, chief lending off, all of the different folks that are involved in here, and in where do they get their lead gen from, right? And then where do their sales, what is the feedback from their sales team? They're all faced with that kind of question: is this a quality lead or not, right? So it's super relevant, and I love that's kind of what we're going over today. That's the topic. So listen closely, guys. You're definitely going to get some, guys and girls, you're definitely going to get some tips from Scott here that you can immediately take. So we're just getting started. But one thing you mentioned, I just wanted to ask a quick question. I'm sure you work with some of your clients who have kind of leads they're purchasing, like Lending Tree, right? Do you have any idea, like, what does that cost to fund a loan? Because you're not the only lender who's buying a Lending Tree lead, right? You're up against 10, 15 different lenders sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it's three or four.
Three or four.
Most of the time it's about 3 or 4. But yeah, I mean, it can get expensive quick if you don't have the right, process in place. And it's, I think everyone kind of has always heard speed to lead. right? When it comes to these leads where you're competing against other people, speed is critical, right? And a lot of people say it's the most important thing, which I agree, it's very important. But there's a lot of other things that are important that a lot of people forget about how to do it. Essentially, they'll call it really fast and they'll maybe call it again later on one time. But the companies who are actually following through to call it the fifth, the sixth, the seventh time and structuring and staggering those calls to be at different times of the day strategically. One of the kind of little nugget that I've talked about a couple times in other podcasts, but the idea of using the time of day the lead came in, using that strategically in how you follow up. And what I mean by that is that, a lot of times loan officers will just come in and call through the leads right away in the morning and be done for the day.
Mm.
Or, that lead came in at 2 o'clock or let's say noon, and you're calling it at 8 a.m. every morning. Chances of them being available at 8 o'clock. So you got to use that 12 o'clock piece there. Maybe you call at 11:30 one day. Maybe you call at 12:30 one day. So you give it a little bit around that noon time frame. But ultimately, to answer your question, I mean, every lender is a little different, but I would say that overall, you're looking at the best of the best is going to convert 5 to 10% of these shared types of leads. Some are going to be a little less, and those are the ones that we love to work with because we can take that 2 to 3% and get it up to 5 or 6% when we start implementing redistribution strategies and setting up our prioritization model and doing these things to make sure that we're squeezing the dollar out of every marketing dollar that's spent. It's kind of what we specialize in.
So let's do that math there. 5 to 10%. So let's just say the harder end there, right? 1 in 20. We're gonna say 1 in 20 of these leads people are actually converting. That's those
Right.
are hard numbers. What's each one cost on average? Do you think like $100?
You're looking anywhere from 50 to 100 and 100 some dollars. I guess shared's a little less. You can also buy exclusive leads where it's just you. So those can be a little bit more expensive. But yeah, I would say on average, 50 to $100 depending on the lead source.
So you're looking at $2,000 to potentially close one.
Both
Wow,
one.
that's a lot of
Yep.
money, right?
Yep.
Well,
A
so
lot.
that's why
And yeah,
making sure you're getting the deals from your own database is so important. But that's the only plug I'm going to throw out there for our company.
yeah, for sure. And it's not even that. I mean, just leads you've bought in the past, you can still nurture
For
in certain
sure.
ways and track what they're doing. We do a lot of helping clients figure out, call it a lead score, where, a lot of companies in the past have just looked at the attributes of that lead, or maybe there's some propensity model they're using to determine what the likelihood they're going to close. But what we've started to layer in now is engagement. Like, how is the consumer engaging with the email you're sending? Are they opening your emails? Are they clicking on the link in the email? And we're tracking that and then using that as a scoring metric that goes along with other attributes you may have about the customer from either the past or what came over with the lead record itself.
All right. Well, we're kind of getting into some of the meat and potatoes here pretty quick, and I think we might as well jump into. I got two of the really main questions I'm going to ask you. Is like, what are some of the best performing strategies from mortgage leaders in the U.S. in this current market right now that you think everybody, if you're not doing this right now, this is a huge miss for you.
I mean, our bread and butter is distribution and prioritization. Those are the two, like I've always called kind of the backbones or pillars of Velocify itself. But it really makes sense. It's all about, in our eyes, the start of it at least is you have to have a good method to distribute the lead that's going to make sure the lead gets called. And once that lead's distributed, you have to make sure that you have a prioritization plan around it. In which ways should your salespeople be following up with the leads? You can't just call the lead one time. And again, you talked about how how you need to be strategic in how you follow up, how many attempts you make, and are you calling because they've opened an email? There's all kinds of different things you can do along the way. But then it comes back to distribution again. I would say the most successful companies we work with have also not a really good distribution strategy, but also a redistribution strategy, and then asterisk if needed. If needed, hopefully not. Hopefully the salespeople call it the way they should. But there are things that come up. I mean, guess what? Loan officers have families who get sick and they have to miss work, and they have leads sitting there and they need to get work. And some companies just say, well, I don't want to touch that lead. It's assigned to Susie. I don't want to give it to
Yeah.
someone else. It's Susie's lead. But the customer, is going to need a call back. And if Susie's out for 2 or 3 days, what happens to those leads? And so we really work with a lot of clients on figuring out what is the right way that fits their culture, right? Everyone has a little bit different of a culture. Some are really intense, some are laid back. but we can work with them to find what works for them that still gets customers taken care of and optimizes the conversion over time, versus letting leads that just sit there and rot away and it kind of gets thrown in the trash can, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a really good tip right there. I mean, all of us are going to be out once in a while of the office for any given reason. We were talking before this call. We know several people who are in that situation, and when that happens, do you have a plan in place? Right? Is there a clear outline strategy, or do those leads just sit on the table and go slowly cold?
Yeah. One of my favorite little tricks that I did over the years that really moved the needle. And I have a slide that I did that actually Velocify ended up kind of stealing from me in a way, but they kind of made it part of their sales presentation, was that we had these web leads that historically these were current customers of NationStar, where they went online and raised their hand that might be interested in refinancing. So it's a current customer, it's a great lead source, but for some reason we just never could convert the lead more than 2% before
Hmm.
Velocify. And over time, as we then implemented a prioritization structure, which we didn't have before, we saw that go from 2% to around 10 to
Wow,
12%, like
that's
that.
that's a huge dollars
Huge,
for the
huge
company
difference.
too.
Then we added redistribution. So now it was, hey, we expect you to call in these timeframes, but if you don't, we're going to redistribute the lead in certain ways. This will blow your socks off. We went from 2% to north of 20% from where we were at before when we added
Wow.
redistribution. It's a great lead source. It was a fantastic. You have a current customer raising their hand that they want to come back, and we were converting at 2%. And all we did was add these layers of strategy built into it, and now we went to 20% and above. Now, a key thing just to throw out there, this little nugget thing that I've done in the past that has worked well, I'll get to it now, is what I call a SWAT
Hmm.
tank. So we do a lot of shark tanks in Velocify where if leads aren't being worked, other people can go and shark the lead from someone else, take the
Hmm.
lead from them. But I actually took that to the next level and had what's called a SWAT team. And my SWAT team changed every month. It was kind of like an award you would win type of thing. Every month you had to qualify to be on the SWAT team. Usually it was our top 15 people based on a number of different metrics. And what I had them do was I gave them access to leads that were dispositioned as not interested or doesn't qualify by loan officers who had started with the company within the last
Hmm.
6 months. So think about that. You have a brand new salesperson who doesn't know all the rebuttals yet, doesn't understand the guidelines yet, and they're giving up on these leads very
Sure.
easily. And so, people have had in the past, we've done second voices by the manager and what have you, but the managers get busy. They don't follow up. And, they're great, but they're not on the phones every day with like the top loan officers are. So what I ended up doing was I essentially kind of I call it a bounty, if you will, but gave it like an extra bonus that if you take a lead from the SWAT tank and you convert it, you get extra money or you get extra percentage
Hmm.
on that. And we were able to move that needle again and we would lose sleep at night. Like, are they saying the right thing? We got to listen to the call and do some coaching and understand. But instead, I just said, if we can write these rules and we can make these leads available and go from there. Now we had current customers. This is the other key part that we did. We had current customers went through this process. They said not interested. But if my SWAT team person called it and they confirmed the customer really wasn't interested, they took an action that says confirmed by
Hmm.
SWAT. And that told me, as the marketer, as I gave data back to the marketing team, was that this is legit. Like, I know you in the past you can't trust the data because we said not interested, but this, if you see confirmed by SWAT, it's legit. So we need to come up with a different plan for that customer down the road. It's not just put them back into the marketing cycle over time. We need to figure out what that plan actually looks like, or if it's confirmed by SWAT didn't qualify, then we know we can send them a series of emails over the next 6 months about how to improve your credit score. We were always really cautious on the marketing specific detail we got down to because we couldn't trust the data that people were putting in. But once we had the SWAT team confirm it, we are like, okay, let's go all in on this. And again, we just started to chip away at certain things to get that conversion rate up the way we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably super important that you can actually trust the data that you're looking at. I think the majority of
Yep.
organizations that have tons and tons of data, they don't trust it, right? It's either dirty or the
Yep.
person who put the data in maybe didn't understand the instructions on what each field
Yep.
means, right? So then you can't build marketing automation that feeds off of that stuff if you can't rely on it.
Yeah. And we've even taken it to the next level over the past year. We came up with a way in Velocify, or really could use it with any system, but It gives the ability to really get into the details as to why a lead didn't qualify, without giving the salesperson this massive list of things to choose from. We're able to pretty much give them a high level reason and then give us a more detailed reason, but use it in an action versus in the past what a lot of clients do today is they say not interested. And in the comments, they'll say customer wasn't interested because of this. And so the marketer comes in and looks at the data and says, oh my gosh, how am I going to tell the difference between someone who the rate was too high or they just weren't interested because they're going to sell in 6 months, or to go through and to tell line by line on each of these leads what actually was. Now we can give them a very specific, here's the 10 that said their rate was too high, here's the 5 that said this, here's the 4 that said this, and send them on to their different paths down the road for the marketing stuff. And that's where it gets to, I know you're not doing a lot of plugging, but I'll plug for you. The sales boomerang comes into play there, because now if we have a customer who said they weren't interested, but now we get an alert that says there was something that happened, maybe they were interested now. Just because they said they weren't interested 6 months ago, they have this new alert that came in, maybe they are now, or maybe they're out shopping now. So let's get in front of them and what have you. And you can really start to kind of tell that, your lead came in, and now you can take it out over years of time to really come up with what that plan looks like for each customer.
Now, Scott, I have seen you in action, and I have seen some of the lucid charts and these big maps of processes that you created before to kind of document everything that needs to happen and how it all works together, especially with like the sales funnel and the prioritization for. So let's just dive into that. We've talked about 3 major buckets that folks should be focusing on right now. One is lead scoring, the other is distribution of the record, and the third was prioritization. So I think I'd like to hear a little bit about prioritization. You mentioned sales boomerang alerts, right? Those are kind of from any lender that I ever talked to, that has to be your highest priority, right? I mean, you talked to these people before. You've done their loans most of the time, right? Like these should be floating to the top. But if that's coming in at the same time that you're getting like a lending tree lead, or you're the same time that you're getting maybe a I don't know, any other opportunity through a referral partner or something like that, how do you actually help structure the loan officer's day, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, since you said it yourself, I mean, there might be a more important lead source, but there also might be a more important sales boomerang alert lead versus
Yep.
another one. And there might be alerts where you're like, this is great, there's an alert, but it might not take, human capital to, call the lead 6 times. Maybe based on this is what we do. I'll just give some secrets away here. So we'll, score the customer. We have the kind of likelihood to close again, or looking at attributes of the lead that may, tell us that there's a higher chance to close the loan long term. And when that alert comes in from Sales Boomerang, we don't have a ton of people in some cases to just call every one of them. So what we do is we say, if the score of the lead is above this, then call it. If the score is below this, let's not call it right now, but let's start sending them some drip emails. Then if they open that email or they click on a link in the email, that tells us they're even more interested. Then let's call those people. And so, to your point, it's like, but then there's also other leads that come into play, and leads that we should follow up with 6 times and what have you, and make sure we're calling around the same time of the day. So from a prioritization standpoint, it's really understanding what you want your strategy to be, and then setting up a structure that makes the salesperson's life easy. One of the things that we talk about day in and day out with our clients is that, salespeople should never have to think about what to do next. They literally call someone that's in their list, and they just move to the next lead. They don't have to stop and think, okay, what do I do now? What we find over time is that if you are giving them some way where they just have to, okay, call this person now, what do I do next? I might spend 30 seconds here. I spend 5 minutes here, 4 minutes. If you add up all of that time at the end of the day, it's crazy how much time you wasted. And studies that Velocify has done says that it's probably close to 40%. 40% of your day wasted literally just thinking about what am I going to do next. So what we set up is these prioritization structures so that you don't have to think. You literally call and you just go to the next lead and the next lead and the next lead. And oh, by the way, when a new higher important lead comes in the top, it's going to come in the top, and you call that lead next. And you're always working through this list. The other studies that they've done that we talk a lot about is, if you're following this structure and you're wasting 40% of your day, guess what? You can make more contact attempts. And if you make more contact attempts, guess what? You're going to make more contacts. And those contacts are going to turn into applications, and those applications go down the funnel. It becomes a numbers game at this point. But the end of this, end of the day is that the study shows you can make 49% more contact attempts if you're following a structured priority order that's automated for you, right? And if you can make, again, 49% more contact attempts per day, now you were making 20, now you're making 30. Well, 22 business days in a month. Now you're making 220 more contact attempts per month. If your contact rate's 50%, you're making 110 contacts. If those, 20% of those turn into applications, you now have 21 more applications per month per loan officer. And go down the funnel, right? And now you have more closed loans because you're using a more structured way to do it.
Well, I think if there's two different folks that are listening right now, one could be, I would call it an owner, and one would be a player on a team. So let's say it's the owner of the business. Man, having someone on your team like Scott, there's a reason why all of his clients keep coming back to him, and then he's dominating in his world. It's because you need this expertise. It moves the needle for the business, right? Scott doesn't even have to if he doesn't want to do any marketing for business. Everybody's coming to him. He's got more than he needs because this is so valuable to lenders. So if you want to reach out to Scott, I'm going to do a plug for his business. Feel free to reach out to him. He might not be able to use you. He's got so much, but you should at least talk to him. Maybe you'll learn something. For sure you'll learn something. And if you're if you're an actual player, if you're a marketer, or someone who's in charge of like the lending operations, something like that, for sure you should be asking the question. Maybe you're a smaller lender, right? And you're thinking, is this something you have to be a big lender with a huge budget to do? So Scott, I want you to talk about that. Do you have to be a big lender to do this? It sounds complicated.
Not at all. No, we have clients who are some of the biggest companies in the US, and we have clients who are 2 or 3 users in the system. The same principles apply. You still need to follow up certain ways. Now, if you don't have a ton of extra people to do it, doesn't matter. You still need that structured way of what's the most important thing for me to do. And at the end of the day, you might not get to all of it, right? End of the day, you may not get to all of it. But if you have a structure in place to say that if I don't get to these leads, something still happens to them. And in our case, we would set up automation of things to do that kind of stuff. You still need the leads worked. We find a lot of lenders who are smaller and that kind of, let's call it, 5 to 10 loan officers, where they buy a bunch of leads, they're doing real well, but then some of the leads start converting and they get busy in the pipeline and doing other things, and those leads start to just sit and kind of die off. Versus if we have some type of automation to send that stuff out, now we can focus on this bucket of leads and really just focus on those who are interacting with the emails, or maybe there's a sales boomerang alert that comes in that we need to jump on in certain cases. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but size for us, from the size of a client doesn't matter. The principles are pretty much the same. One thing I'll throw out as well that, when it comes to, because a lot of clients say, well, I'm good. My team's doing it right. They got it all handled. I trust them. They're closing loans, right? End of the day, what we end up doing is secret shopping our clients when we're working with them. Essentially, we put a lead in on their website, or we put a lead in their system that looks like a lead that came from a lead provider. And we track, we have a phone system, I have an email system, I have an SMS system, and we secret shop our clients to understand what are the salespeople actually doing.
That's every marketer and salesperson's worst nightmare, what you just said.
Yeah, no doubt. And it really came alive because when I was in charge of lead distribution for NationStar, we actually took on a huge portfolio of customers, and I was losing sleep every night, wondering, was the lead getting called the right way at the right times and what have you. So I put a lead in myself and just tracked. And it evolved into, when I was at Velocify, I would do this for all of my clients, where we would shop the experience and we would look to find where we had gaps. Now, we've probably done close to 600 of these secret shops. We call them lead experience screenings, by the way. Secret shop sounds really bad. The lead experience screening sounds so much better. And so we have a whole PowerPoint that we put animation to show kind of what's happening when over a timeline of 3 weeks. Okay. And so we're tracking how many calls do we get. Now, we don't answer the phone, by the way. So we're just tracking what happens when I don't answer. I get a voicemail. We listen to the voicemail. Is the voicemail good or bad? We look for SMS. We open an email and track when we opened it, so we can see if we got a call right away, or what if the strategy shifted at all. But then better yet, and the owner people will love this. Maybe the players aren't going to be fans of this one, but the thing that I learned early on too was that salespeople, given how and it's kind of two sides. I'm a former salesperson, so I can say things about salespeople and get away with it sometimes because I've
Yeah.
been there, done that. But at the end of the day, when it comes time to follow up with customers, loan officers are not always the best at it. And, it just
Yeah.
kind of is what it is. However, there's ways around it. There's ways to automate things to help make their life easier, to make sure that when they call the customer, they actually answer versus calling someone and then you've kind of wasted this time. They didn't answer the phone. You got to follow up again. There's ways around this, and this is where we come into play. But from a secret shop perspective, we actually call the loan officer back. We have our
Hmm.
phone system. We spoof the phone number we put on the lead record. We have a conversation with the loan officer. We act interested. We've been a mortgage. We know what sounds good as a good lead, low LTV and a good loan amount, what have you. But then we stop along the way and we say, hey, Mr. Loan Officer, Mrs. Loan Officer, can you hang on 1 second? And I'll, do this little acting job over here. Hey, my wife just yelled at me. I got to take my son to soccer practice. I
Hmm.
totally forgot. Can you call me back tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Yes, no problem. We'll call you back at 2 p.m. And then we track again what
Hmm.
happens. Number one, do they call me back at 2 p.m.? Right? Most of the time, unfortunately, they don't. They usually 50% of the time they miss it by more than an hour. Well, sorry, 50% of the time we don't ever get a
Hmm.
call again. 50% of these 600 times
Wow.
we've done it. Of the 50% that we do get a call back, 85% of the time the call is late by more than an hour.
Wow.
85% by more than an hour. So we track then what happens. So it's not only that, like they make one call, do they make 2 calls, 3 calls, 4 calls, 5 calls? Like how do they follow up with it after that? So we kind of track, we do 10 days and 10 days after. And what this does for the owner, if you will, is that you now have insight into kind of what's going on with your leads. Your leads may not be converting. You wonder why. Well, let's look at where the opportunities are. Maybe or maybe you have the best structure set up that humanly possible, but at the end of the day, your salespeople need to execute it. So we've identified where these gaps happen, and we make adjustments based on that. I have a story. I did one. I had a university that I worked with for a number of years when I was at Velocify over a 3 or 4 year period, and we did probably, I would say, 15 over every quarter.
Hmm.
We would do one, and the first one was bad. The second one was much better, but there was never a perfect one. We never said, "Oh wow, we did it perfectly." There was always
Hmm.
opportunity when doing these, and we're just chipping away at little things. By the end of it, it was much better, much more consistent, happening more consistent over time, but it was never perfect. And so we're always trying to find where those gaps are, what we can do to adjust, usually around the follow-ups and the timing and all that stuff like that. So it's a good success story, but we actually do that for our clients. It's a service. We actually work with lead providers and we work with software companies who are looking to get insight into how their companies they're trying to sell to, or lead providers find it helpful because the customer will come and say, "Man, these leads just aren't converting very well. We're going to stop buying them." And they're going to say, "Well, actually, we put a lead in for you, and we found that you're not calling it 6 times. You're not spacing the calls out the right way. You're not." And so we'll work with them to help make those changes for the client and see if the lead conversion rate goes up because of those changes.
Man, this has been so valuable. So many good nuggets here. Let me just ask you this question. Will you do some consulting with anybody who's listening who may not use Velocify? Like, would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely. I think Velocify again is what we know. We've done it, but the strategies are still useful and apply elsewhere. It may not work perfectly the way we've seen some systems just aren't able to do it the same way, but we can set up some workarounds or manual ways to do it. Outside of that, using the strategies that we have in place, but still make it easy for the
Very cool.
salesperson.
Well, look, I mean, I encourage anybody who's listened so far, and there's no way you're in this business and you're not interested in every single thing that Scott is saying. If you want to learn more just about yourself, Scott, are you willing to hop on the call with folks? They can just reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. And this kind of leads into I think what we kind of want to end on anyway is that I'm a big part of the Mortgage Professionals Providing Hope with Dale Vermillion, his charity, and I have a website. We can put it up on the link or wherever where clients can go and donate to the charity. Or if they do it through my link, I actually match their donation. So you take your $100. So I match. So far, we've raised over the last 2 years $24,000. We're on our way to our goal is 25. So we're really close, but we're just going to increase our goal and go from there. But what I end up doing for a lot of clients from time to time is, no need to go through a huge contract in some cases. If you just need an hour of, strategy talk or what have you, I usually just ask people to make a donation to that, and then I'll spend an hour with them to go through a couple things and what have you. If it turns into something more down the road, then great, we'll attack it when that time comes. But I would say that anybody who would like some time, I might ask them to make a donation. Doesn't have to be, but that is something near and dear to my heart with what Dale's doing there. So always looking to help him out
That's
as much as
awesome.
I
So
can.
why don't I just take a second and just explain a little bit about what this is? Scott, Dale, and myself, and Alex, our CEO, and a few other leaders, thought leaders in the industry, are going to be doing a paid webinar in June. And this is essentially to promote mpph.org. It's Mortgage Professionals Providing Hope. Scott, why don't you just tell people, like, what is this charity doing? It's so awesome, especially for this industry.
Yeah, there's a number of things that the charity does itself. An orphanage overseas, stuff here in the U.S. The thing that really got me, really interested in really kind of moved the needle for me was when I found out that Dale's wife, will go on certain nights of the week to the local Walmart and drive around the parking lot looking for, single moms or single dads living in their cars with kids. And so what the charity does is it has housing available through a couple of apartments in the area. And what she'll do is help take them, from their, the situation, essentially put them into the apartment to give them a place to stay. And so, it's really powerful. And, if we look at our industry over the last couple of years, we are so blessed to have the situations we have. A lot of us have made, done well for ourselves, and, it's a way to give back. And so in my little personal story is, I mentioned this actually on his podcast recently, but not really public to this point, but my father committed suicide when I was 9. And after that happened, we couldn't go back to the house where all of our stuff was at. And so we had like 2 weeks where we had no clothes. Just didn't have anything. And so there was a local charity that provided, clothes and stuff to get us by for those kind of that time period till we could get back into our house. And so for me personally, things like that are important. So, with what Dale's doing for that single mom living in the car, doesn't have a place to go, just really, really moved me a lot. So, back when I started the company, essentially, partnered with Dale and said, "Hey, Dale, how can I help? What can I do to help?" And so that's where I came up with the donation thing that I have. So every, dollar that clients donate to it, I'm going to match. So anyways, it's a real personal story for me, but at the end of the day, it really just comes up kind of, aligns really well. The other thing that, I found out recently actually was that my father was denied a loan essentially to buy a house. I'm not saying that's why he ended up making the poor decision that he made, but it did probably play a part into it. And so I find myself waking up every morning now more motivated to make sure that our customers are working every lead to the best of their ability, making sure that we have the right, dispositions on leads so that we can nurture them in the right way to make sure they ultimately have that American, dream of owning a home. So that's what gets me out of bed
Man,
every morning
Scott,
now.
that's amazing, that story. It's like something incredible, amazing, positive, wonderful coming out of tragedy, and just really awesome. The way you tell that right there, I can tell you right now, I want to make a donation. There's no way I don't want to be part of that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah. And the crew, Dale's whole crew is just amazing, and the servant mindset they have is just second to none. So you can't wait to partner with everyone to drive even more funds into helping people in whatever way we can.
fantastic. Well, we can end, and I'll just say, Scott, thanks so much for being on. Everybody, if you want to reach out to Scott, feel free. How do you want them to reach out to you? Want to do email, Twitter, anything?
Yeah, I think you just go to my website. So it's sdp-solutions.com. And there's a free consultation link there they can click on and submit their information. We'll reach out and
I
go
love
from there.
it. Look out for the webinar that we're doing in June. There's going to be some serious knowledge dropped in that webinar, and we're going to raise a ton of money for this amazing charity that we just talked about. Scott, thanks so much for being on.
Richard, My honor, or my pleasure to be with you. My honor. Yeah,
Hey, it's my honor. Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, please give us a 5-star rating, subscribe, and tell all your friends about the show. We at Sales Boomerang started this podcast to elevate the mortgage lending industry by sharing the kind of exclusive, insider knowledge from the successes and failures of the best of the best. The foundation of every successful lender is borrower retention. Sales Boomerang is the #1 fully automated borrower retention system in the industry. 1 in 2 of the biggest lending companies in the United States use Sales Boomerang to make sure they reach out to their borrowers when they need a loan, and more importantly, before their competitors do. If you want to learn more about Sales Boomerang, check us out at salesboomerang.com.